This article from The Gamer: PlayStation will continue to focus on live service thanks to Helldivers 2. This is an article by Joshua Robertson. What they try to do is get you to consistently pay for this game over and over as you're playing it. If they're successful, they are very successful, more than a single player game would be. But on the other side, if they flop hard. It's a whole bunch of wasted money. If nobody's playing this game, it's not successful, especially if it's like a free-to-play one. Say they do a free-to-play one, but it sucks and nobody plays it. Well, now they're not making any money at all. So let's get into this article. PlayStation has had a pretty up and down year, to put it mildly. Third-party titles like Stellar Blade, Rise of the Ronin, and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth propped up the PS5 earlier in the year, as did the enormous success of Helldivers 2, which has become one of the most successful live service titles this year. Then Concord happened. So Concord was another PlayStation game, Sony game, and it was a $40 live service. It was kind of like Overwatch, and it was supposed to be their next big franchise. If you've seen that Secret Level show on Amazon, they even had an episode of that for Concord. Well, the game came out, like 600 people were playing it, and they shut it down within a week. And they refunded everybody that bought it, which was hardly anybody. So they spent, rumor, $400 million to make that game, and they didn't make 1 cent back because they refunded everybody. So that's the downside to live services. If they flop hard. Concord not only failed, but failed spectacularly, was pulled from storefronts after less than a month. It was extremely expensive, and a talented studio in Firewalk was completely shut down as a result. Why are we going to assume that this studio is talented? I don't know what other games they've made, but obviously, they did not make a good game in Concord. I don't know how we can call this studio talented when they put out this game that appealed to nobody, and nobody played it, probably the worst bomb of all time, probably passing E.T. So I don't know how we can call them talented. They go on. So you'd assume that PlayStation would potentially want to cool its jets on live service to avoid another cataclysmic failure. Apparently, Concord wasn't enough to sway the company from its current course. In a new interview in Famitsu, translated by Insider Gaming, PlayStation co-CEO Herman Hulst has recommitted to focusing on live service titles for the foreseeable future. In the interview, Hulst claims that people are still itching for great entertainment experiences, but admits there is more competition nowadays. Why are we equating, and it's in quotes, because this was his exact words, great entertainment experiences? Why is that just, oh, they must mean live service? Why does a great entertainment experience have to be live service? That's just weird to me. So Hulst, the co-CEO, they quote him in this article, and he says, "One thing that remains constant is people's desire for great entertainment experiences, and attention to games continues to grow. However, this has also created competition, and like many companies in the industry, we have had to make changes to our business to solidify a more sustainable operating base." If you have competition in live service, it's a big gamble. You're either going to be a big hit or you're going to fail. If you are a single player game, you can still be successful but lose in the competition. You may not be number one. People will still buy and play your game. They don't have to invest all the time in it. If it's a live service game, that's a huge commitment from players. Most likely, they're picking one to play. If they're playing Fortnite, they're playing Fortnite. If they're playing Helldivers, they're playing Helldivers. They might throw in Marvel. They might throw in something else, Overwatch 2, Apex. But to add another one of those onto your plate is a big time commitment. To add a single player game is not, unless it's Elden Ring, and we'll get into that. You have a chance with a single player game to not win but still be successful. With live service, you're most likely dead. It's a huge risk. For me, it's primarily Fortnite and Dead by Daylight. Alright, so think about how much time you spend in those games. What are the chances that you could add a third one to that and put in the same amount of time that you do to those two games? Because I know how much at least you play Dead by Daylight. You're streaming that all the time. So to add a third one onto that, that's a commitment. But to play like Wukong, okay, that's something you can just do and play and get over with, right? It's not a commitment. It's not, you have to keep playing it and playing it and playing it and playing it and playing it. And I think that's why a lot of live service games fail. Also, that they're kind of boring and repetitive. But that's just my opinion. So Hulst then says that PlayStation will continue to focus on developing live service titles along with the story-driven single-player titles that our players want. Suggesting that the current plan of action is largely unchanged, Concord be damned. That's rather surprising given the scale of the game's failure, but it seems as though PlayStation is using Helldivers 2 as somewhat of an excuse to keep going. Which makes you wonder, how much money did they make on that game? With the huge loss that they made on Concord, and they're not even changing a thing, how much money are they making on Helldivers 2? They must be making a load, and that's the thing. It's a business. Everything is a business. You have to understand that part of it. You know, us as fans, we don't look at it that way, but we have to. We have to understand why companies do things. Why are they doing live service games? Because that's where you can make the most money. Why do all these people do all these mobile games? Because that's where you can make the most money, and that's all it is. Where can we make the most money? And those are the games that are going to be made. And that's why it's really hard to get games like Alan Wake 2. How long did that take before they finally did it, and it still hasn't made money? But a live service game, if that takes off, it's making a load of money. So that's like the whole business plan. Where can we make the most money? And that's all the guys sitting at the top, the guys with the stocks, that's all they care about. And we can sit here and say, you know what? I like Helldivers 2, or I like Marvel Rivals, or Apex. We don't need any more of these Concords and all these other games that you could be making other games for us. Well, everybody that plays these live service games, they're setting the tone. So we can sit here and complain, but the problem is there's a lot of people that are playing these things. As long as people continue to play them, and it's the same thing with mobile games, they're going to continue to make them. That's just the state of the industry. And for those of us that love the single player games or regular multiplayer online modes, you know, I think those will always exist. But the problem is, I think a lot of these are getting canceled or not getting greenlit because they would rather do a live service game and risk that for the chance that it could be a freaking killer. Adding another one would be pushing it. Yeah, I do Fortnite and Rocket League and Sea of Thieves. Adding Marvel, we had to cut some out. See? That's the thing. So why, if somebody like you, why would you try a Concord, especially when you had to pay $40 for it? It's like, for every Helldivers, how many don't make it? That's where these studios, they're risking everything. They said the Concord studio got shut down. I bet you the Helldivers 2 studio didn't. But if Helldivers 2 failed, I bet you they would have. So you're sitting there working on a game, knowing your job is at stake on whether the pressure, that's got to be insane. Because you can't just have a mildly okay game. You're still probably going to get shut down. Game studios are getting shut down all the time. It's because they're spending way too much money to make these games, in my opinion. Once you get a PS5, you're only getting non-live service games. Well, hey, there's some fun ones, Scott. I'm not against live service games. I just don't like the direction of that's all we're going to risk new IPs on. Because if you think about it, for like Astrobot, Wukong, new IP, well, actually, Astrobot wasn't a new IP. It was the second game, right? It was a new IP they did the test thing for. But Wukong, new IP, Stellar Blade, new IP. But like everything else is a legacy franchise or a sequel because they don't want to take the risk. If they would rather take a risk on a new live service game than on a new single player game. So I think we're losing creativity in single player games by live services being successful because I think less new IPs are getting greenlit for single player games because, well, if we're going to take a risk, we're going to take a risk where we can make the most money, and that would be live service. So Holst goes on to explain exactly why PlayStation is maintaining its course with live service titles, and he may as well have just pulled up Helldivers 2's player count and sales right then and there. We are learning a lot as we establish the ability to develop high-quality live service titles within SIE. What the hell's that? Sony Interactive Entertainment, I think. Helldivers 2 attracted many players through continuous content provision and achieved results that support the potential of live service titles. So, here we go. We have 2 games this year, new ones from Sony. Live service. Concord, like an unbelievably impressive flop. Historic. And then we have Helldivers 2, which is very successful. So the fact that we have this huge flop in Concord. Helldivers 2 is making so much money that this doesn't matter. So that shows you how much money you can make if you're successful. So if they're like, hey, 50-50, we're making a load of money, we're going to keep going this route. So who knows how much money Helldivers 2 is making, but it's making enough to eat the Concord loss and more, where they're like, yes, we want more of these. Concord may have been a complete bomb, but PlayStation has seemingly been able to sweep it under the rug since Helldivers 2 was massively successful. There's no doubt PlayStation was hoping Concord would be successful, especially with appearances in Amazon's Secret Level, which we talked about that. That's very weird that got an episode in there and the game's already dead. But I'm sure it will feel if its live service plans are justified if it can get at least one to blow up every year. And that's it right there. That's it. All it takes is one to be successful. I wonder how many unsuccessful they could have, because this seems like they're just going to keep going with more, right? So if we have one huge success in Helldivers and one bomb in Concord, is Helldivers making enough money where they can afford two? Where they can afford 2 bombs? They can afford 3 bombs? How many more of these are we going to get? Live service, I know there's a lot of people against those games. I think it's because they feel like what I was saying earlier, less focus is being put on new single player IPs and content. So we're not getting any new creativity. It's all sequels, or it's all already successful franchises. Like, we're going to be playing Indiana Jones later. That's not a risk. It's Indiana Jones. It's already been wildly successful. Zelda is not a risk. Mario is not a risk. Final Fantasy, you know, these are already established IPs. Wukong was a risk. Stellar Blade was a risk. They both succeeded. So I would like to see more of those. And I think we don't see a lot of those because of the focus on at least the big studios, the big publishers wanting their studios to make live service games. So I think that's why a lot of people don't like live service games. I do think that there's obviously enough gaming out there for everybody to play, but I think when you're making too many of them, you're just hiring these people, making a flop, and closing them down because it didn't succeed. What could they have made instead that could have been a cool new game that might have been successful in single player? People would have paid $60-$70 for and not had to put the time in that they'd have to put into a live service game. From what I read, Helldivers 2 has generated an estimated $1.3 billion in revenue. All right, well, there you go. If that is accurate and the Concord loss is accurate, that's 3 times right there, right? That's 3 Concords. 3 Concords, they still would have made money, because 3 Concord losses would be $1.2 billion. There it is right there. All it takes is one. Live service games, mobile games, those are the money makers. And as long as people keep playing them and paying over and over and over the life cycle of the game, they're going to continue to get made, because at the end of the day, video games is a business, and if they don't make money, there are no video games. And sometimes just making money, especially when you become a big corporation, is not enough. It's always more and more and more and more and more. And that's why the focus is going to continue to be on live service games with Sony. And I wouldn't be surprised if Microsoft goes this route. Nintendo's our last single player hope to not go that route. But I would not be surprised if we see a Pokemon live service game in the future.